Hello and welcome to a special festive week of Collector's Lot. As we get ready for Christmas, I'm in this fabulous half-timbered house in Worcestershire with lots of Christmas collectibles to get you in the mood. There's something of an animal theme to today's collections. We'll be walking the dog with a yo-yo collector, braving the Arctic winds to find out about a husky collection, and doing the continental with actress Vicky Michelle's frog collection. And as usual, we'll be following the making of an antique of the future. This week it's a special doll's house complete with Tudor beams, or on the Channel 4 website. Time now to find out about this week's living craft. Today, a man whose past experience in television set design has led to a whole new career. VIC NEWEY's dolls' houses are renowned, and this week he's making an old curiosity shop in his own individual style.
I make miniature houses in 1/12 scale, sometimes 1/24 scale, for collectors who usually are mostly adults, and it's a very popular hobby worldwide. I like to specialise in the earlier period buildings, Tudor or Victorian, so I can show the twisted sagging roofs and twisted timbers. And on the Victorian shop front, I looked at the little bow windows and make things look rather quaint. The building I'm making at present is the left-hand part of my street scene. I call it the Curiosity Shop, but I'm making a special front opening version this time because in the street scene, the building opens on the side so that access can be got without disturbing any models that might be on the street. It usually takes about 50 hours to make a building like this. Here we've got the basic structure, the fireplace hole already cut out, the back and the side fitted on, and we're ready to start laying the flagstone floor. Here I'm using all the offcuts of 4mm ply to make the flagstone slightly misshaped. Then they all fit together like a jigsaw to make the flagstone floor. Now I'm just going to glue these pieces and fit them individually across the floor. We leave quite a large gap here, wider than you would think, but when it's textured, it closes the gap up considerably. Now, while we're waiting for the floor flags to dry, we can offer up the different pieces for the wall. We've got the mantle piece with these little brackets, which go on here. And here we've got the little door, which is a brace door with its little lock and its frame, which goes to the left-hand side of the fireplace, and that's a door that we presume is a staircase to the upper floor. And finally, to finish the ground floor construction, we apply the fire back, which is made of a vac-formed plastic miniature brick in perfect 1/12 scale, and this gives the finishing touch. Now next we start the ceiling, applying the beams, which are made of soft wood. I'll have to apply them carefully so they don't look too straight, because in old buildings the beams often run slightly askew, and then that will make the ground floor ready for texturing, which I'm going to do next. We're going to mix the texture paint, which I'm going to apply to the whole of the ground floor, flagstones, the walls, the ceiling. This is a special texture paint that we use in TV scenery. It's specially made so that it doesn't crack or chip. Then we wet it over to remove the very large brush marks, and then we apply a grain with a toothbrush. And when that's painted and stained, it looks very realistic indeed.
And the finished old curiosity shop will be the prize in this week's Golden Year competition. Now to this week's living craft, a gift that would make anyone's Christmas morning. VIC NEWEY is crafting a replica of the old curiosity shop, and today he's working on the timbers and the upper floor.
So I used to work as a scenic painter, and when I started doing TV scenery, I used to do all the Dickensian programmes, and my job used to be to age and weather these buildings and to do all the special paint effects. And I've developed that into the miniatures. I'm going to paint the brickwork at the back of the hearth with two different colours of brick colour. We're going to blacken it with an airbrush to give a sooty effect in all the corners, and up under the mantelpiece. And in the centre of the fireplace we usually do a sort of an ashy white effect with a little brush of Artex just to give it that effect. I'm going to coat up the floor with a combination of two colours to give a nice flagstone effect. Once again we use the magic Artex, which is rubbed into all the nooks and crannies. Here I'm going to paint a fine line between the slabs to individualise flagstones. Right, now the first thing we do when we start the second floor is to lay the floorboards. These would have been either oak or elm, depending on the local trees available, and were much wider than the boards that you would see today. Then we can let that set for a while before we start the next part, which is the upper timbers. Right, here I'm going to use a jig to make the first of the A-frames. I'm going to use the pin gun, and then we should find that the entire frame lifts out. Now here we've got 3 of the A-frames fixed together, all ready to be placed in position. Now we're going to go back to the ground floor on the exterior, where I've applied some very thin ply, which is going to give the impression of plaster that's fallen away. And here we've got some brick which is going to be applied and then textured over the top to show the effect that the plaster, that it was once rendered all over and the plaster's fallen away, and expose the brick. The window I'm working on here is for the upstairs front, with using the little panes that we've just cut on the bandsaw. I assemble the frame, slide them into position, a little bit of glue on each one, allow that to set, and then we're going to put it into the outer frame, which makes the window project slightly from the main frontage of the building. I fit the window into position. And the rest of the front timber can be planted on, and then we can ready to start the attic frontage. You can usually tell by looking at a building whether the person that had it built was wealthy or not by the amount of timber used. In the early days, when oak was plentiful, you find that the timbers strutting are very close together, and as time went by and the forests were depleted, so you see 17th century timber framed houses with huge gaps.
Stay tuned for the competition in part 2 and the chance to win that doll's house. There's more information about all the items on the programme on page 331 of 4. Time for another visit to Vic Newey's workshop, where he's handcrafting a scale replica of the old curiosity shop. Today he applies the roof tiles and the exterior paintwork.
Our next step is to cut the roof tiles, which are cut in long strips. We use a template to make sure that they're all the same, that they'll interlock correctly. And here we have the left-hand roof piece, which is already prepared in advance with the beams already applied and textured and painted, so that's ready to be applied. Now we start to apply the strips of roof tile, which we staple in between. This gives a nice undulating ripple to the roof, which is a typical sign on all buildings, although the ripple would have occurred right at the beginning of the building's life and not in later years, because they used green oak, which rapidly warped and twisted. And using this method, we slowly work all the way up the roof. I'm just going to take the sharp edge off the tiles and round it off a little and then break a few tiles here and there just to give the impression of a nice old roof. There are quite a few makers that make Tudor buildings, but no one makes them quite the same as another maker. My buildings are entirely individual to myself, and I wouldn't dream of copying anyone else, and I hope no one copies mine. Now that can be left overnight, preferably to dry nice and hard, so you can have a gentle sandpaper just to take the exceptionally rough parts off. So I think we can leave that for now. The timber frames used to be assembled on the floor. They used to knock all the little pegs in, then they'd get every available piece of help from the neighbouring village and try and haul it up upright. When the upper stage of a building sticks out more than one below, it's called jettying, and you can get buildings where there's sometimes 3 floors, each one's jetted out further than the other, so by the time you get to the top floor, the people across the street could probably reach across and shake hands. And I think this was what led to the Great Fire of London completely destroying so many houses because they were so huddled together. Nobody really understands truly why they made buildings jetted out. So I think it's to keep the rain off the foundations, which were very poor in those days and liable to subside and crumble away. Now, to get the nice silvery grey finish on the beams, I need to apply the first of several colours to get the nice weathered oak finish. I'm applying it while it's still wet because the undercoat is merging in with it to make the final colour. And then when it's dry, I shall add slightly darker colours which will be dragged on sideways with the brush, which will catch the highlights where we grained it with the toothbrush, which will then give the impression of cracks and ridges.
If you'd like more information about Vic's dolls' houses or anything else on the premise. Now our final visit to Vic Newey's workshop to see him putting the finishing touches to our doll's house in the shape of the old curiosity shop.
This is a typical late Victorian style of bow window when the panes were quite large. This is supposed to give the impression, once again, that the paint is peeled off, so we're not going to paint it a solid mass of colour. Now to paint the door, it's best for me to open it up so that I can paint the door without it continually moving. I also like my houses, my models, to have a nice, fairly hidden opening rather than one that jumps out and says I open here. So I always try to disguise the opening as best I can. I like to age the bow window and give it a nice distressed look by adding the lighter colour onto the mouldings, which gives the impression that the paint's chipped and rubbed off. Well, I'm just doing a nice bit of ageing to the roof, particularly into the gully, into the sag between the rafters. Quite frequently, early tiled roofs are very porous and went very rapidly green. I'm just aging the bottom of the bricks, a bit of green spray gently around the bottom just to give the effect of a bit of rising damp. There's no doubt there was plenty of that around in those days. As we get near to the final touches of the building, we can do some interesting little touches like applying the shop sign. In this case it's a curiosity shop, but of course it could be anything. In the past it's been a bookshop, old maps and prints, a clockmaker's, and in the future I think it's going to be, for a customer, it's going to be a little pub, a little inn. So carefully slide that in position, ready to be aged to take the sharpness off. Right, now we're going to stick some little posters on the wall, just a bit of added effect. And some of these are going to be seen peeling off. There's even one there, Dick Turpin, the Highwayman, which can be over-papered with a more recent one, which will be the timetable for the London coach. Just like today when they stick posters over the top of earlier ones. And there's even one there of smuggling. And what we're going to do then is give them a bit of a spray, and we'll scuff the top, peel it down a little, make it look as though it's been there a long time. It just gives a little finishing touch. Now I'm just going to age and mellow the sign a little because it's a bit too stark. So what we've got to do is just take off the sharpness with a little oil stain. That's the final touch. So there we have the Curiosity Shop.
Stay with me because after the break I'll be taking a closer look at Doll's House decoration, the very best of all things miniature, and David Staff.
Right, this could all plunge us into darkness, folks.
Beautiful.
We ought to glue this though to make it look more nice.
Yeah. Lovely. Lovely, lovely, lovely.
Yeah, see, there is no substitute.
You're so clever. I'll buy you next big packet of hot chocolate. Do you hit? No, I thought it would go. I think at night they come.
Right, what's happening now? That should have cracked it.
Yeah,
That's it.
red light's
I'm
coming.
going to take all his secrets.
He's copying all my secrets.
Yeah, I need
He's
some.
going to start appearing in Scottish miniature with replicas of my little houses. I think it's in Edinburgh actually.
That's right, it will be in Edinburgh, yeah.
Yes, so that's it. I press the button again,
Chuck to
the red
that.
button.
Banging and anything really. Tell you
Speed.
That's
there.
great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Brilliant, isn't it? Just a shade bright up there. It's not bad, is it?
No, no, not at all.
It's on limit to.
Okay, great. Oh, that's great.
Let me just block that one for you. Okay, you've got this as a
Yeah,
setup.
thank you.
You might want to do just a few stills while we've got the lights in.
Can I get out now?
Yeah.
Yeah, because you've got the well, it's set with the clouds, colouring and everything.
I think we're there.
Is that good? Cool.
So we start off there. Ah, yes.
What?
A bit more twig would be good.
There is more twig.
There is it. Brilliant. It's a jolly useful weapon, that, isn't it? Just
Yeah.
being able to hide. Thing is, even though the line's still there, you'd never make it out amongst all the twigs, branches, and so we're actually using the door as part of the sky. But
Jewish
I
monopoly.
think I can operate the camera.
That's what it was, wasn't it?
I hadn't thought of that one.
The AB's in London.
I'll try one more. That last inch is really difficult. It looks quite good.
Looks great, yeah, really good.
Should I do one more?
I just thought that tree looks a bit strange.
Panning round in a minute.
Silver wire. Silver wire and like pulls it in with like enamel crystal or something and then fires it and melts it and pulls that area with that colour. You know how you get those stained glass sets that and you put them in the oven before mixing? It's so good.
It's not bad, it's not quite. Oh, God.
How do you tell between crystal and
Do we need to do a sound effect saying I'm hungry now?